Aden's twin civilizing strategy of educating the sons of the sultans and backing up the efforts of political officers were with punitive RAF bombing raids could be said to have worked best in the East Aden Protectorate. But that had a good deal to do with the fact that the Wadi Hadramaut, a deep and fertile canyon carved into a high, barren plateau known as the Jol, happened to have a dominant non-tribal elite of Sunni merchant Sayyids, with whom the British found it easy to do business. The Wadi's fabled inaccessibility meant that it was almost terra incognita as far as the Western world was concerned until the early 20th century. In 1918, the British in Aden had been protecting Hadramaut for over 30 years, but only a handful of explorers and not a single British official had taken the trouble to venture beyond the coast. The traffic was all the other way. Since as early as the 10th century, Sayyid Hadramis had been descending from their wadis to the port of Mukalla on the coast to travel east to southeast Asia, as well as west across the Red Sea to East Africa to spread their distinctively Sufi brand of Sunni Islam. Generally welcomed on the account of their Sayyid claim to be the descendants of the Prophet and their great learning, they soon settled among the higher echelons of their Muslim host societies and prospered. Where Sayyid Hadramis led, non-Sayyid Hadramis followed, to trade, do business, and make fortunes. In British times, Hadrami boys as young as 12 and of all classes migrated to join whichever of their relatives had blazed the most lucrative trail, to learn a trade from the ground up, golden to money-making, by sayings like, "Be as industrious as an ant, and you'll eat sugar. And if there is a benefit to you in the arse of a donkey, stick your hand in it up to the waist." By the end of the 19th century, there were thriving communities of migrant merchant Hadramis scattered over much of the southern hemisphere. Often they remained in Al-Majar, place of immigration, for decades and intermarried with the natives, sometimes maintaining a wife and establishment back in Hadramaut as well. Mixed-race Hadramis are still a common sight because they always sent their foreign-born sons home to El-Beled, as they called it, at the age of 7 to imbibe the moral purity of their beloved ancestral homeland. Just as it is hard to imagine a people with a narrower and more parochial tradition than the northern highland tribes of Yemen, so it is hard to imagine a people with a broader outlook and more experience of the world than the Hadramis. Their hard-headed thriftiness and an exclusivity that was often interpreted as arrogance gradually superseded their earlier reputation for holiness and learning, earning them a reputation not unlike that of the Jews in pre-Second World War Europe. Hadramis are often referred to as the Jews of the Arab world, and a still popular joke against them goes, if a Hadrami had a place in heaven, he would rent it out and go live in hell. Hadramaut remained a well-kept secret in the outside world until at some point in the 1910s, a fabulously wealthy Hadrami, the founder of a property empire in British-ruled Singapore, imported the first motor car to the Wadi Hadramaut, undeterred by the fact that there was not a single road in the region. Once disembarked at Mukalla, the precious vehicle had to be carefully dismantled and loaded piecemeal on the backs of camels to be ferried the 200 miles up the coast, up to and across the Baking Jol Plateau, and down the precipice of the Wadi Wall. Lovingly reassembled in the city of Tarim, it was set to work every Friday for almost the next 30 years, ferrying its owner along the region's single, tiny stretch of road he had constructed between his home and the mosque. Only in 1932 did Aden get around to endowing its future East Aden Protectorate with a few landing strips, one of which proved useful the following year when the romantic dream of retracing Arabia's ancient frankincense route tempted the British explorer and traveler writer Freya Stark to brave Hadramaut's pulverizing heat insanitary conditions, and lack of roads. The effort almost cost her life. After weathering the long donkey ride across the bleak Jol and reaching the sweltering lushness of the Wadi Doan, she fell by an attack of measles and dysentery. At death's door, she had to summon the RAF to airlift her from Shibam back to Aden. In the early 1930s, Abu Bakr al-Kaf, a member of the same family that had imported the first car, invested over £1 million of his own money in a first road up and out of the Wadi, onto and across the Jol, all the way back down to the coast. Without any surveys, its builders relied on ancient camel tracks to indicate how wide and steep the hairpin bends up the Wadi wall should be. With the magnate's money, the builders paid off the tribes through whose land the road passed. It was almost finished by the time Freya Stark visited. As soon as it was, the camel drivers who had been plotting the eight-day-long route for centuries realized that it spelt doom for their livelihoods. They wasted little time in obstructing it, forcing the British to broker a compromise between the old and the new. Some goods were restricted to carriage by camel, others by lorry. Difficulty of access was one excuse, but the British had had other good reasons not to investigate Hadramaut too closely. The region's tribes were as restive and quarrelsome as those of the West Aden Protectorate, but thankfully sufficiently distant not to threaten Aden. It was shortly after Freya Stark's ill-starred expedition and Mussolini's invasion of Abyssinia in 1935 that Aden turned her attention to Hadramaut. Once it had been ascertained that its two rulers, the Kaiti and the Kathiri sultans, were incapable of ordering their lands by securing the trade routes. A British colonial official named Harold Ingrams was dispatched to the region to introduce it to the benefits of Pax Britannica. Energetic, ambitious, and deeply committed to the task in hand, Ingrams succeeded in persuading an impressive total of 1,400 different tribal leaders to sign up to an agreement that put a stop to the warfare which had been impeding work in the Wadi Hadramaut's date groves and fields. At least three factors seem to have secured what is still remembered in Hadramaut today as Usul Ingrams, the Ingrams Truce. First, Ingrams was backed by the inexorable force of the RAF, whose bombing raids he called in reluctantly but effectively, and with some approval from the natives. What do a few lives matter if we're all going to have peace? One wealthy migrant, Hadrami, reassured him. And anyway, it has nothing to do with you. It is from God. Secondly, and more importantly, because he and his at least equally impressive wife, Doreen, both held enlightened views about how to treat with the Arabs. They went as native as they possibly could, taking up residence in Hadramaut. They learned Arabic, dressed in the local style, and did not begrudge hours, days, and months spent cajoling and reasoning and arguing with Hadramis, she with the women, who proved largely receptive to the message of peace, he with the men, who were more distrustful. Instead of behaving like a typical British colonial officer, Ingrams strove to conduct himself among the Hadramis in the manner of the wisest of native sheikhs, but the strain of the job must have told on him. While staying with the couple in Mukalla in 1937, Freya Stark noted how, with his mop of fair hair and pale blue eyes, Ingrams looked like an angel whose temper has been tried rather often.